Well, first of all, I want to apologize for not being there in person, and also thank Carlos for putting together such a great session, and all the people who contributed to it for giving me 3 really great papers to read. I wanted to start out by giving you a bit of an anecdote. I recently was talking to a friend about what I was doing this past week, and I said, oh, and I need to come up with some comments for a session where I'm the discussant. And he said, oh, what's the topic? And I said, corporate social responsibility, CSR. And his response was, well, isn't that just cute, silly fluff? So there are 2 things. First of all, cute, silly fluff would be CSF, so clearly he's an idiot. But more importantly, I do think that that is something we hear a lot. I mean, I've been doing research on cause-related marketing for over a decade now, and I do every now and then have people go, oh, that's so cute that you study that. That's so sweet. But this idea that it's not as intellectually rigorous, and that much of the research is just asking people, would you pay more for a brand that's socially responsible? And people, of course, say yes, and there's a self-report bias. And a lot of that is the kind of work we see in industry. But I think what I really love about these papers is that they were not only really strong in terms of managerial implications, but that they went deep in terms of theory and underlying causes for consumer responses to corporate social responsibility, and really had some, I thought, really surprising, interesting, well-thought-out designs and results. So really fantastic, not at all fluffy. Having said that, given my friend's comments about cute, silly fluff, it did come to mind that I recently started living with 2 experts on cuteness, silliness, and fluffiness, my recently adopted cats. And sort of as an aside, these are 2 traumatized cats. They were taken from their mother when they were 2 weeks old, so I guess I was socially responsible in adopting them. They had a lot of diseases and infections, ringworm, scabies, eye infections, lung infections, and because of that they have some behavioral issues. And one of the cats is more dominant over the other cat, and she really likes to suck on the more passive cat's neck. So Joni sucks on Jeannie's neck, and Jeannie doesn't like it. And so there has been this sort of observation on my part that there is this entire ritual that Joni has, I guess by research, come up with, that before she does the bad thing, maybe the socially irresponsible cat behavior of sucking on her sister's neck, she does all this coddling. So you'll see cat CSR, which is cats snuggling responsibly, I guess. And then you'll see sort of this, I guess you'd call it foreplay, not in the way that we normally think of, and then sort of the arm around the cat and then licking her, and then she'll start sucking on her neck, and Jeannie will let her. If she just attacks, it doesn't work. So this actually, even though it's fluffy, and none of these papers were fluffy, it did sort of make me think of the first paper and just how interesting it was that it wasn't just looking at corporate social responsibility in a vacuum, but what happens when a company has this image of being socially responsible, and then, of course, bad news hits. I think we all thought of that Toyota story, which, of course, very well timed, and all the many other stories where a company has an image that they're trying to portray, and then something happens, like people are driving their car and they want to stop because the truck's about to hit them and they can't stop. So that's not so socially responsible from the part of the car manufacturer. And then this importance of how you time the messaging and the nature of the messaging. Again, that's the kind of deep thinking we really need to see more of in consumer behavior research, and how abstractness affects it. I mean, all really insightful, good research. So I just thought that was great, and not at all fluffy, I should add. I also thought it was just sort of interesting. It made me think of future research possibilities dealing with this issue of timing and the conflict between the messaging that a company sends out about all the good things they're doing and being prepared for bad things happen. Even unintentionally, companies will have negative information leaked about what they've done, perhaps unintentionally, or some sort of neglect or accident that's occurred. I also thought of the Tiger Woods brand, certainly not a corporation, but certainly relevant to marketers and to many corporations. He recently, I don't know if you saw, it was televised, it's up on YouTube, he recently gave this very long apology to all the people he had harmed. He didn't list all his sins or his mistresses, but he listed the many obvious and not so obvious people who had been affected by his actions. He said he was ashamed and embarrassed. But 2.5 minutes into this rather long, I'm sorry to my wife, I'm sorry to my mother, I'm sorry to my colleagues, I'm sorry to my friends, I'm sorry to my children, I'm sorry, 2 minutes into it, he went off on his foundation work and talked about how his father and him started it and how they've helped millions of kids with scholarships in California and in DC. And it kind of seemed out of nowhere. And I don't know, it seemed maybe not hypocritical, but it made me think of the paper and sort of this whole issue of when you time your announcement of how good you are relative to bad news about how maybe not so good you are. I thought it was really interesting, and again brought up just the importance of the kind of work that was presented in the first paper. Second paper, again, excellent, just fantastic work, and looking at the importance of realizing that CSR and how effective it is and how consumers respond to it could depend on the product category, luxuries versus non-luxuries, and the nature of the consumer, and certainly why they're purchasing within a category. So, very interesting to look at the people who seek status from luxury versus people who maybe consume luxury for other reasons. I also loved the celebrity manipulation. I was a little sad because I'm working on a study where we're also using Angelina Jolie as a manipulation to see if it will cause people to behave more pro-socially as relative to other celebrities who are perhaps not engaged in that type of thing, like Paris Hilton. But I thought it was a great manipulation and showed the many ways that consumers can be affected by different ideas of what status means. And also beyond Hollywood and the Angelina Jolies, it's gotten to be, I have a friend who works with hip-hop artists, and he said within the hip-hop community, it's now critical that once you've made it, you have to have a foundation. You have to be doing something to give back, and that's become sort of a status symbol along with all the other status symbols, because all the really successful hip-hop artists now have gone out of their way to do something to help. And so that is part of that culture now, and one of the symbols of success. And then if you look at the Silicon Valley or just high tech in general, of course you see Bill Gates, who's now focused on his foundation and using his brain to solve social issues, and this whole movement towards social innovation, and Google's foundation, which isn't just about giving money, but giving brain power and coming up with intelligent ways to solve real world problems, and how that's really created a culture where now everybody's thinking, oh, we should have something like that. Like all the really successful, smart companies are doing something to make the world a better place. Maybe we should too. So this idea of celebrities, not just in terms of corporate social responsibility, but also in terms of creating a culture either within a company or within a group of consumers towards it being a high status symbol or sexy or cool or whatever it is to volunteer, to give, to care, to do what you can to help those in need, I think is a great, great thing to demonstrate in research, and also to see more of that in action as we're trying to make more people and companies engage in pro-social behavior. Last paper I also loved. I actually went to ACR Latin America in Brazil a few years ago, and can tell you that the people are indeed benevolent, as the authors pointed out, and it is so important for us in any topic, but certainly with CSR, to be aware that we're really at different stages around the world, and there are countries where everyone is very much aware of the companies and their CSR and very concerned with it. And certain segments within every culture are more prone to that. But certainly Brazil is very important to look at. As the authors pointed out, the gap between rich and poor, though it's widening in the United States, sadly, is still much bigger in places like Brazil. And so comparing how the wealthy and poor react differently to CSR and what they're willing to sacrifice is very interesting. It's also obvious, I guess, that people are more price sensitive if they're struggling to put food on the table and clothes on their children, but it's interesting to note that they're willing to sacrifice other things and to sort of look at the ways that less affluent consumers, though they may not be willing to pay a higher price, may be willing to sacrifice other things like satisfaction or convenience, etc. And really pointing out that there is interest in doing good around the world, and in different cultures, different variables may influence what's more effective and what's less effective. So again, really great research. All three papers, I think, just did a good job of not just identifying a phenomena, but thinking deeper, looking at different kinds of consumers, different product categories, different situations like bad news, and different strategies for dealing with it, and communicating your CSR strategy, because it's not just what you do, it's how you tell and when you tell people about what you're doing that matters so much. In terms of future research, just like to see more of this level of quality, obviously. But one of the things that I've really been thinking a lot about is when we look at CSR, it's so broad. There's so many things that fit under corporate social responsibility. And I've started to think about this distinction between what I call corporate social responsibility and corporate social contribution. So corporate social responsibility would be things like paying fair wages to your employees, designing safe products, which many of us have in mind, certainly with the recent news events, giving health insurance to all your employees, not polluting, being aware of your carbon footprint, and all the things that we think about is really every company should do this. This is responsible business. And then corporate social contribution would be sort of going a step further and not just doing what everyone is likely to think every company should do if they're responsible, but actually going beyond that. So having a foundation, reimbursing your employees for time they spend volunteering, Cause-related marketing, certainly one of my favorites, where you're raising money for a cause and not necessarily just doing things to clean up a mess you've made, but actually trying to make a contribution to a world problem that you aren't really responsible for, but that the people within your corporation and organization have deemed as important, and they're willing to put time, brain power, and financial resources towards solving it. So I think that's an interesting distinction, and really it's good to look at other types of distinctions within the corporate social responsibility umbrella and think about how those work together and how those might be different in terms of how consumers respond, and how companies can go about doing a mix of both, making sure they're doing the right thing and maybe going above and beyond the call of duty to really build brand loyalty, et cetera, and all the things that all marketers want to build for their companies and for their brands. So that's it. Again, thank you so much. Fantastic papers, really great work, and I feel very lucky that I got to discuss such good research. Thank you.